Today, Somewhere on Earth invites you to discover the Bijagos Islands, an isolated territory of Guinea Bissau in West Africa. These sacred lands resemble a vast river delta. Marcelino is an elder, an Omi Grande, the highest position in the social hierarchy. The forest, which he knows so well, is where he finds the plants for his ancestral remedies. Marcelino is a traditional doctor on the island of Karache in the northern Bijagos. The island of Orango in the far south is a World Biosphere Reserve and the country's first national park. This is where Pedro lives. He's the reporter of Okinka Pampa, Orango's small radio station, so he's always on the lookout for stories. On the island of Caravella, Quintino is about to undergo the most important phase of his life, the fanado, the highest initiation rite, which will open a mysterious, secret world to him. Over the centuries, the Bijagos have forged a very close relationship with nature.
I don't know what's going to happen to me, if I'll be equal to the challenge and able to do what they want me to. That's why I'm anxious.
The Bijagos Islands are off in a backwater of time, isolated from the rest of the world. Just a few miles from the mainland, they form a labyrinth of sandbanks and mangrove swamps, and they have the strongest tides in Africa. These islands are inhabited by spirits. They form a mythical boundary between the land of Africa, the ocean, and the endless sky. Islands tossed into the sea and forgotten in the vast Atlantic Ocean. There are 88 of them spread out over roughly 100 kilometers north to south. It is the only archipelago of Africa born from a river delta, formed thousands of years ago following a rise in the level of the seas. The early Portuguese navigators brought back tales of wild islands inhabited by indomitable warriors. The Bijagos people never submitted to the colonial authority. The villages are all inland, away from the sea, as if the inhabitants needed to protect themselves from unknown outside forces. And for centuries, this isolation has allowed these islands to remain unspoiled.
Hello there. How's the family? How are you?
Marcelino is a traditional healer in Mpincha, a village on the island of Karache. He learned the traditional medicine from his father and began to treat people in the northern islands with him. A few years ago, Marcelino received training in the fundamentals of modern Western medicine from foreign doctors.
So how's the baby?
Bebê, bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite. Kuma. Yo. Wow.
Thanks to the children, I became a healer. I've liked children ever since I was young. It's still the case. What I do for them. I instruct the mothers how to take care of their little ones. I teach them about the most frequent wounds. The moms trust me, whether it's traditional or modern medicine. Wherever I go, I look after the children. And my greatest joy is curing them because I see the results of my work.
Bom dia, bom dia, bom dia, bom dia.
Does he suckle well?
Yes, he does.
And he has a fever?
Yes, at night.
Oh, bebê. É bem que tá só fora.
We're doing our best for the children to get a decent upbringing, so that they'll have a good head on their shoulders. This is what we're teaching them. When they're 7, they start to go out into the bush, to say hello to people, to know their manners. The children here learn by example. You learn by watching grown-ups. If I ever see children doing something wrong, I stop and scold them. I'll give them some guidance, and they listen to me, because they know that I'll be telling their parents about it. A child is not just his parents' child. He's also the child of the entire community. That's why we treat them all the same. We take care of all the children. When I see a newborn baby, it just fills my heart with joy.
Marcelino, who's close to 60 years old, is an elder of his village, an Omi Grande. The younger generations have to submit to the decisions and demands of their elders. This is the principle of payment to the elders, who are the ones who guide the children's upbringing. There are not many schools here, and very few clinics. More often than not, Marcelino has to turn to Mother Nature to treat his patients, to save lives. The Bijagos elders are all the living memory and guardians of the community's secrets. In order to keep the traditions alive, Marcelino passes on his knowledge to the younger generation.
The palm tree plays an important role here in the Bijagos. We use the trunk to build our houses. We make palm wine with the sap. When the nuts ripen, we can make oil. We use the fronds to make string. These are the palm fronds we use to make brooms. And the ropes we use to climb the palm trees. We also make soap from the blossom. Every part of the tree is good. We can use everything in the palm tree. Plant lore and traditional medicine are great secrets. The forest is like a pharmaceutical factory. If you're not a doctor, you're not allowed to learn the secret formulas. We don't transmit the mysteries of the plants to outsiders. If you don't live here on this land, we'll never show you anything. Before cutting a root, I ask the trees forgiveness I ask it to help me cure the sick person. You can't just come into the forest, take what you need, then turn around and leave.
Marcelino has to take care of a child on a nearby island. Before undertaking a voyage, he has to invoke the spirit so that he'll ensure a smooth journey and watch over his family during his absence.
Kaos kuma kuna sinti. Kuna asinti minjo? Ina nga do na omenengo. Businti ustai minjo. Kaos kuna njenya ya namo kadi. Yung meneno
He got hurt playing. They brought him to me 4 days ago. So I took care of him, and now I'm seeing him again. He tells me he's feeling better. This is what I use to treat him. It looks like he's doing better. I treat stomach aches, indigestion, cuts, bruises, headaches, and snake bites. I take care of all of that. Yes, even snake bites.
Nature jealously guards her secrets. There are a number of sacred sites on the islands. They are the realm of Iran, the spirit of the islands. Tradition is the bond that ensures the social cohesions of the Bijagos people, and only they hold the key to it. This land beneath its vast sky is a sanctuary of unspoiled nature. Marcelino is wise in his people's lore. The Bijagos draw their force and energy from the natural elements all around them.
The first thing my father taught me was how to observe the fish, how to study the water. If it's windy, the sea gets stirred up, and you can't see anything. But if the water is clear, you can see the fish a few meters in front of you. If you can't reach the fish with your net, you have to approach like this. You stalk them. It's a very long apprenticeship. We, here in the Bijagos, we remain pure and independent all our lives. We are poor, but our land is generous. It is our riches. The Bijagos are very remote. We're a free people. Not many people can say that, and it's a privilege to live here. We have enough to eat here. We are as pure as the seawater is clear. That's the Bijagos. That's our riches. This is an old tree, and me, I am an old man. The tree and I, two wise old men. It's the biggest tree of the Bijagos, and I'm one of the oldest men around here. Yes, that's how it is.
Orango, the largest island of the Bijagos, is a land of savannas and forest bordered by mangrove swamps. There are very few villages, and the island is a national park. Everyone on Orango knows Pedro, a generous man always ready to help out the community with his two-wheel tractor. Pedro's life changed 20 years ago, the day he received his tractor broken down into its parts. His brother, who had emigrated to Portugal, managed to dig up this great bargain for him.
I transport all sorts of things. Soil, bunches of palm fruit too. But not only that, I also carry coconuts, peanuts, wood. anything that's heavy. I do it to help the community. Anything people need, I'll carry it. I even transport people. It's really kind of a museum piece. I have to start it with a rope. The villagers on Bubak and Uno, the neighboring islands, also want me to come and help, but I don't want to take my tractor to other islands. I'm here to help the community of Orango, because there's no other means of transportation here. I like helping people because I think you should help your neighbor. And as I have the means, I do it. It's good to help people in need because you have to think ahead. Someday, I could be the one who needs help.
A few months ago, an incredible project saw the light of day on Orango, a community radio station. Pedro is one of the volunteer reporters of Radio Okinka Pampa.
Nós põe ponto final na apresentação de No Notícia. Muito boa noite. Fica sintonizado conosco. Notícia não volta à antena amanhã, a hora que está 10 horas. Boa noite, tchau, tchau. Junta conosco.
A Rádio Okinka Pampa.
The radio station creates a bond between all Orango's inhabitants. The single daily program deals mainly with questions of public health and the environment. In just a few months, Pedro has become a story collector, and thanks to his work as a radio reporter, he has been discovering new facets of his country every day. Orango is a labyrinth of mangrove swamps and bolongs, vast sea inlets where salt and fresh water mix. This morning, Pedro is off on an assignment with Joao, a ranger of the Orango National Park. They're headed for the southern tip of the island to a marshy zone very difficult to reach. There, they hope to find the emblematic animal thanks to which the Bijagos was declared a World Biosphere Reserve.
We have a large biodiversity here. There are a lot of animals. Most of them are very dangerous. There are horned vipers, mambas, scorpions, poisonous stingrays. So just walking around here can be fatal because you could be bitten by a horned viper, a mamba, stung by a scorpion. It's really dangerous. In short, there's biodiversity. I love animals. Then again, I don't really have a choice. I have to deal with them. Nature is dangerous, but I protect it.
This park is home to the very rare saltwater hippopotamus. Over thousands of years, the river delta has become an archipelago, and these hippopotamus have gradually adapted and become acclimated to seawater, where they take refuge when the freshwater lagoons dry up.
Do you know how many hippos there are in the national park?
It's hard to say exactly. Some are still in the mangrove swamps. Others head for the rivers of Aringozino. But in the lagoon, here, there's probably around 40 at most.
And tell me, Joao, how can you tell the difference between the male and the female?
It's easy to tell. The male is always bigger. His head is bigger, and his maw is longer. And he has a hump on his back. The female has a flat back.
Hippos have a lovely place in our lore. It's a sacred animal, highly respected in our culture. Here they say that a brave person is as strong as a hippopotamus. If they say a person is like a hippopotamus, that means he's a great person, someone strong. And when he dies, we hold a traditional ceremony. So the Bijago people have always held the hippopotamus in great esteem, even before they founded this national park.
This morning, the little port of Arango is bustling with activity. Once a week, a pirogue comes in from the mainland. Pedro carries on with his reporting for the radio and is off to Palau, the southernmost island.
It's a very isolated island. There's no drinking water, and there's nothing to eat. All the products come from here, from Bissau, or from Bubak, the main island. We mustn't forget about the people living out there. Palau is a sacred island. The Bijago people discovered it a long time ago. It's quite sacred for all of us. It's a magnificent island, and we protect it.
This is the first time Pedro has set foot on Palau. Santino is one of the guardians.
What's that tower?
That tower dates back to the time of the Portuguese.
On the tip of the island, there are a few rusty remains from the time when Palau was an important sea mark for navigators. For a long time, Palau marked the sea route of the Portuguese colonial forces. It is the furthest point south of the archipelago. Lapped by the waves of the Atlantic Ocean, it is the last land before Brazil. island is home to one of the largest colonies of green turtles in the Atlantic Ocean. 4 months of the year, the females of these creatures, straight out of another age, climb up onto the beach where they were born to lay their eggs.
Is it easy to live on such an isolated island? What does it feel like when you're out here?
Well, it's like that here. You can't get away whenever you want to. You're stuck. I'm not here by chance, and I'm not here on vacation. When I'm on Pualo, it's to work, and my job is to protect our riches, the nature all around.
The rangers on Pualao do good work, and not only for Guinea Bissau, it's useful for the entire world. I know that there are endangered species, and it's important that Guinea Bissau begins to think about protecting its resources and wild animals. I feel good here. I would like to be able to help this turtle. When I see the effort she has to put out to get back to the sea, it's incredible. It's tiring for her. If I could, I would carry her right to the water. It's so hard for her to get back to the sea. It's a beautiful animal, gentle. It really moves me. Turtles are not aggressive. They don't attack. They don't bother anyone, and that's why we have to make an effort to protect them. It's really a lovely animal.
The deserted beach still bears the mysterious tracks of the fascinating life cycle of sea turtles. At dawn, Pedro is witness to the fragile equilibrium of this wild land imbued with the spirit of the Bijagos. In the north, the island of Caravella is the gateway to a mysterious realm. Quintino is a cabaro. In the traditional society, it's the free and carefree age. Soon he'll undergo the most important passage in the social hierarchy. Quintino, 30 years old now, has reached the age of maturity. He's preparing for the final initiation ceremony, the fanado. This ritual takes place in the forest. Based on suffering, endurance, and deprivation, this much-feared ordeal lasts several months. Once he has passed the fanado, Quintino will be a kamabi, a respected man capable of helping the community and protecting his family. Quintino has 4 children. Soon, he'll have to leave them for several months' exile in the sacred forest. The fanado is a long voyage on the path blazed by the spirits.
A woman is very important in the life of a man, because if you don't have a wife, you could turn bad. But if you have a wife, you have to work for her. This is my wife, Safi. We've been married a long time. I love her very much. I work for her. I go fishing. I go into the forest. I work in the fields. Sometimes I go off for longer periods in order to feed my children. And I bring home what we need. We both love each other very much. We get along well. And when I go off for 2 or 3 weeks, I miss her. And she misses me. We're sad, and that's why we enjoy spending time together like today.
The fanado is approaching, but before that, Quintino has to take care of the coming harvest. The Bijagos have always led a nearly self-sufficient existence. Very few products come over from the mainland. Each family has its own rice field, and there's only one rice harvest per year after the rainy season. In a few days, the rice will be ripe. It's a very tricky moment for Quintino. He could lose his whole crop if he doesn't keep a close watch over his field. For the palm trees are full of weaver birds just waiting to swoop down for a feast. Right from the age of 7, the children learn how to protect the rice fields. It's the staple food of the Bijagos.
We come out every day. We get up at 6 in the morning, before the birds get here, and the next day we do it again. That's how it goes every day until the rice is ripe, like this rice right here.
The Bijagos people are not seafarers, but this has not always been the case. There's a legend that once in the northern islands, the men would rig out large pirogues and attack the foreign ships. One day, the Europeans in reprisal pillaged the land, and the Bijagos people saw that as the spirits of the sea who had come to seek revenge. Now, the only arms made here are the cañagos.
We make the cañago with materials we find out in nature. It's the traditional tool of all the Bijagos. We make it with what we get from the forest, like this rope. The elders show us how to make a cañago. It's the first thing they teach you when you're little. It's indispensable for catching fish for food. So when you know how to use the canyago, you become an independent person. You have what you need to work. You can have your own house and all that. It's a gift of nature. The waters are full of fish here, all sorts of fish. Nature is generous. There are shark, stingray, they're very poisonous, sea bream, barracuda. But the fish we're the most afraid of are the rays. If you get stung, it's very painful, and you suffer for weeks.
Enormous clouds drift over the Atlantic. They come from a spot much feared by seafarers, the horse latitudes, where storms and hurricanes are born. It's still the rainy season, the time of silvery seas and leaden skies. A tornado can arise in just a few seconds.
I don't like thunder and storms, but I don't have any choice. We have to live with nature. I would rather go home, but if I go home, we won't have anything to eat. I don't have a choice.
In this part of the world, the heat rises up out of the earth like an invisible wave. A storm always brings a bit of coolness. It's a good time to head for the beach. Quintino's wife, Safi, has come to gather what has been exposed by low tide. The women are just as active in the quest for food as the men.
I grew up observing my elders. Now with Quintino, we have our own children. And I can't let them go hungry and cry. We grow rice, and when there's not enough, I go fishing. I know that in other parts of the world, people have an easier life, but I'm happy with the life I lead. It allows me to take care of my children and bring them up to adulthood. Preparations are underway for the first initiation ceremony.
The village elders have chosen the date and duration of Quintino's fanado. It will last 3 months.
I'm afraid because I don't know if I'll be able to do what they want me to do. That's why I'm anxious.
Today, Quintino is wearing the fetishes of his father, Francisco, chief of the village of Anipok. These sacred objects have been handed down from one generation to the next.
His time has come. Right from his early childhood, he has been passing the different stages of initiation. This is the last rite of passage. That's why I gave him this costume. He's on the path of the fanado. It's a natural event that all our ancestors have been through. We've all been through it.
This costume symbolizes the force of nature. When you put it on, it gives you strength and courage. It's like these horns I'm wearing for the ceremony. When you're wearing them, you're a different person. It's as if some force enters you. You become strong and wild. Something like a bull. Now I'm ready. I'll be going into the fanado house. It's forbidden to talk about what goes on inside. It's really secret. Only the initiates know what takes place there. Even I don't know yet. This is a great day. I'm fulfilling our tradition, and on account of that, I'm respected. The elders, the women, everyone respects us when we are wearing the costume. It's sacred.
Quintino will come out of his initiation ordeal a different man. He will soon pass a major turning point in the life of each of the Bijagos, this people living on the fringes of the world, somewhere in Western Africa. Somewhere on Earth is off to discover Cape Verde, an archipelago of 10 or so islands situated in the Atlantic Ocean, 600 kilometers off the coast of Senegal. 10 little worlds whose sole natural riches are their mountains and their deserts, lands of stone and sand, tormented by the winds and currents. George lives on São Vicente, just across the water from a couple of uninhabited islands. They are a sanctuary, a last refuge for rare and endangered bird species. George and his brother are committed heart and soul to protecting these secret gardens. Santa Antao is the island mountain. Teo knows the island's every path and trail because he's hiked them all. From the harsh mineral desert to the lush tropical vegetation, this island is a land of contrast. Child of the wind and waves, Mitu is a kiteboarding champion. The ocean is where he lives and plays. He grew up in Sal, and his island has now become one of the world's favorite spots for surfing sports.
Sometimes I come here on my own, and there's not a single person. No noisy cars, nothing. And I think this is incredible. This is something money just can't buy. This is natural, and it's mine. It's great.
Set down in the ocean, lost out in the vast expanse of the Atlantic, the Creole islands of Cape Verde possess an air of mystery. Up until the 16th century, the archipelago didn't even figure on the charts. And we don't know who really discovered them first, the Arabs or the Portuguese. The archipelago is made up of 10 islands, 9 of them inhabited, plus a few islets. Dark volcanic rocks exposed to the waves and currents. Each island has its own shape, its own story. Each one of these worlds is separated from the others by kilometers of open sea, often impassable on windy or stormy days. The inhabitants, so often cut off from each other and from the rest of the world, have learned to rely on themselves. São Vicente is one of the most arid of the Creole islands of Cape Verde, a volcanic, barren island with sparse vegetation. Still, George has found his place in life on this island, here where he lives in close contact with the fishermen. These Cape Verdean fishermen who scan the ocean on the lookout for schools of tuna.
When I first got here, there was no electricity, no telephone, no cell phones. For years I lived in Callao on my own, without electric light. But I was happy, because I was part of the fishing community. The most important thing is to be close to the sea, close to the people, and doing your best to help them.
Callao, the village where George lives, is surrounded by volcanoes, lava and stone cirques that George never tires of exploring.
From here, you can take in all this beauty, the wind, the blackness of the rocks, the fishhawks' nests, everything that makes this a mythical spot. For many people, the Viana volcano is even a mystical spot.
A lunar volcanic landscape. Here on São Vicente, where George lives, it never rains, or almost never. It's a stark island that vibrates with raw, wild beauty. Only the skies that blanket it know where it is. From afar, you'd think it were uninhabited, abandoned by mankind on account of its extreme hostility. From his house, George can see the island of Santa Lucia in the distance. With only 35 square kilometers, it is one of the smallest of the Cape Verde Islands. It's also what gives George's life meaning. Santa Lucia is 1 hour by boat from São Vicente. An hour in good weather, because when the sea gets rough, the channel becomes impossible to cross. As a child, George would watch the fishing boats making for Santa Lucia full sails ahead. That's when the island became a dream for him, like a promise for the future. When George was 15 years old, he finally did go to that island with his parents. When he first set foot on this land, he was wonderstruck. Yet he had no idea that this little scrap of land would play a major role in his life. Santa Lucia acts like a magnet to seafarers. Some have even tried to settle there, to raise cattle. In vain. Too far from everything, lacking water and resources. One by one, the settlers vanished. The island had gotten the better of them.
I can't find any work on land, so I have to turn to the sea. There are not a lot of fish, but I have a family to feed. So we fish every day, and we catch a few each time. We didn't get much today so far. This is a good spot. There are fish here. So we fish this area for 4, 5, 6 days. Then we head back.
This is our livelihood, how we put food on the table. They're counting on us back home. We all sleep on Santa Lucia, even if it's cold, and even if we're getting rained on.
As it has always been, in the evening, the fishermen find shelter here on the beach of Santa Lucia. They'll sleep right on the beach.
It's such a pleasure to be here, far from everything, with no telephone, no electricity, with no news of the world that's in such a state, all topsy-turvy, far from the political wrangling. This peace and quiet makes you feel as if you were on another planet. Santa Lucia is completely separated from the troubled worlds of Africa, Europe and Asia, with the wars and famine. Here, you're in a cocoon, and I like to savor those moments.
This is a great place. I leave the island on Saturday and I come back on Monday, and it's always a pleasure to come back here. I especially like it when the sea is calm. There's a nice beach where we can land, and it's a free space. But it rains sometimes, and that's too bad, because things are harder then. But usually there's no problem. I've never left this place, in fact. It's my life, you know.
Silver is the skipper of a fishing boat. He's one of those sailors who has learned how to live with the sea rather than buckling under to it. And he does devote all his time to it. The fishermen patch their sails with rice and flour sacks.
We try to use the sail as much as possible, rather than the motor. The best sacks are the blue ones. They last a good 3 years. The white ones, on the other hand, no more than 6 months. Sometimes you just have to redo the sail completely. Otherwise, little pieces keep ripping away and you lose too much time patching it.
As soon as the sea is calm enough, George sets out to meet his brother Zay. This morning, he'll pass by the island of Santa Lucia and head for the outer reaches of the archipelago towards Raso, a tiny islet cut off from the rest of the world. That's where his brother, Zay, a rabid nature lover, comes to stay several times a year. Now they are both wholly dedicated to protecting this timeless spot. George is proud of Raso. Thanks to the efforts of the two brothers, this zone has been declared a protected area, a closed reserve for rare animal species. It's the refuge and breeding grounds of an endangered species found nowhere else, the Cape Verde shearwater, known here as the cagara.
Eating cagara chicks is a custom that dates back to the 19th century. From the time when ships, Portuguese caravels, would sail through here, the sailors of the time would eat these birds on their way out to India or to Brazil. It's an old custom. It's difficult to change people's mindset.
To its great detriment, this bird has the reputation in sailors' lore of being an aphrodisiac, like rhinoceros horn or shark fins, and of curing certain ailments. George is fighting these long-entrenched beliefs in order to save the shearwater. Meet Zay, George's brother. He has come to check on an Alcatraz chick, another species that, thanks to him, continues to flourish and fly. On these few square kilometers of land, Zay enters into a different dimension.
When I touch one of these birds, it's as if I were touching God. For me, they represent God. It's something that's very difficult to explain, because what I feel is a connection with the very forces of creation. For me, it's like touching God, life itself.
The battle these two brothers are waging seems to be turning to their favor. The colonies of birds here are growing each year. This cagara that Zay's banding flew here from Argentina to lay one single egg. It was wounded when Zay rescued it. He fed and cared for it. These birds eat only raw fish, so every day Zay had to chew up whole fish and regurgitate them into its beak.
How much money do I make with this work?
Zero.
Nothing.
Eu ganho sim.
But what I earn is in my heart. The supreme satisfaction is to nurse a dying bird back to health.
Você consegue recuperá-la.
The joy of rescuing a bird that's dying,
Você conseguir
and then to see it fly off again.
uma ave que está a morrer.
It's worth all the gold in the world.
Paga tudo. Desculpa.
At that moment, nothing on earth can match the happiness I feel.
Que eu sinto.
Coming into Razo, there's nowhere to beach. So George moors his boat and dives in to meet his brother on this island of birds.
É sempre uma grande alegria a gente estar neste trabalho.
Working together is really fantastic.
Nós temos, como ele já tinha citado há pouco, nós desde
We grew up near these wild islands, Santa Luzia and Razo.
Ilhéu Branco, e nós fomos criando.
Our parents passed on to both of us their love of nature and the desire to protect it.
Tentar salvar. Estar aqui.
Being together here today on this island makes me feel so happy because we have a common goal. We're trying to pass on our determination to preserve this spot.
Não só aos parentes, mas aos amigos, às pessoas que trabalham com a gente.
And the work has to go on.
Dar a sequência do nosso trabalho.
George and his brother have brought this very fragile bird to Razo, a coruja, a small barn owl. George and Zay rescued it when it was a month old and nursed it back to health. And today they're releasing it.
Like any wild animal that hasn't learned from its parents, when it hasn't grown up in the wild, when it has never flown like this one here, when nobody has taught it how to fly, I think its chances of survival are close to zero. Go on, go on. This is your big chance.
Zay sleeps on the cliff with the birds. He's one of the family.
Sou feliz.
I'm happy, 100% happy. No ifs, ands, or buts. Unfortunately, few people attain this happiness, and that's because all their lives they just keep striving to accumulate material goods. Why? I think nature's greatest gift is being able to do something that you truly love. Not for the money, but because you feel good when you do it. There's nothing better.
As long as there are men like George and Zay, birds will continue to fly. At the western edge of the group of islands lies Santo Antão, an island mountain, a citadel of steep cliffs. It's one of the highest islands of Cape Verde. The inhabitants here are more turned towards the interior than towards the sea. It's the most fertile island of the group. But up on the high plateau, it's practically a desert. Theo grew up in a family of farmers in the southern French Alps. His ethnology studies took him to Africa, to Mali, and that's where he first became interested in Cape Verde. It was the music of the islands that caught his attention. Theo has spent the past 10 years exploring these islands, one after another. He fell in love with one of them, Santo Antão.
It's dangerous here. I'll show you how to get across. You have to go slowly. It's slippery. When I'm in this type of place, I know it's a bit selfish, but I feel very lucky to be here. In Cape Verde, you fly from Boa Vista, a very arid island, and in an hour you're on São Vicente, which is totally different. Then an hour by boat and you're on Santo Antão. You've gone from arid dunes to lush tropical valleys. Santo Antão, you'll find all that on a smaller scale. You walk just a few hours and you're on the arid side. Then you pass over wooded peaks. You go down into a lush valley where there's lots of water with banana and coffee and guava trees. And you can wind up on the arid cliffs overlooking the sea and black sand beaches. It's a characteristic of all the Cape Verde Islands, and this one in particular, because it has such marked contrasts.
Theo got it right. This island has given him the life that he loves and loves to share with others. These valleys, with their rich savors and aromas that descend all the way to the sea, are called ribeiras. These trails have been carved right into the cliff face, a long winding series of twists and turns that connects the inhabitants. On Santo Antão, walking is not a pastime, but a necessity.
There are very few roads in Cape Verde, so a good part of the population lives at a fair distance from the roads, and many of the valleys, mountains, and landscapes are accessible only by foot. I'm lucky because I've always liked clambering about, ever since I was a kid. And I've always been curious to go see what's over the next crest, what it's like on that peak. It's quite natural for me.
These trails all lead to remote villages or a few inaccessible farms. Sugarcane, yams, mangoes, papaya. The people here work the land. They reclaim farmland from the mountain. This is where Mariatita lives. Over time, she and Teo have become friends.
Well, I was born, raised, and married here. My children were all born here, and I love this place. You have the peace, the smell of the water, the calm. It's a good life. The problem is the trail. We're far from everything. I'm happy here, and I'll stay as long as I can. But when I don't have the strength to tackle that path anymore, then I'll have to leave. That trail is really a tough one.
Thelma and Marlene have different plans for the future. These two architecture students want to become guides. Teo is teaching them a business full of promise here and a way to share their country. They'll have to learn how to read these steep trails, for none of them is marked.
We're on the Planalto Norte, the northern plateau, where the summit is over 1,900 meters high. It's a sparsely populated cattle-raising zone. There are only a few herders. It's fairly arid, and it's pleasant here because you don't run into many people. It's a stark mineral landscape with a lot of wind. This is a fabulous spot. You get the feeling of wide open spaces. You feel that there are no limits. It's all very open, and you can roam wherever you want. You see this mountain? You follow this path here. We're right here. It's marked 1,300 meters.
Maybe we could cut across here.
No, this mountain is much too dangerous. We don't even try. We have to go this way, or this way. Here it's too dry. I had a French teacher who would say, freedom doesn't mean having no constraints. It means having the constraints that you like, that you value and accept. That's how it is for me. The constraints of my work aren't really constraints, because it's something I love doing. I'm in my element. I feel free, and that gives me great satisfaction. I really like this stretch because we started out in a fairly green valley, then we crossed a very arid zone, and here we are again coming into a totally different landscape with a lot of green grass, crops, and water. And further on, you can see the beach, the sea. You can experience so many contrasts in a single day's hike. It feels like you're crossing 3 or 4 different countries. That's what I like about this island.
I like camping. It's really great. We hiked quite a bit today. We discovered a lot of spots. We were lucky to make it here and to cook some food. Plus, we get to enjoy a sunset like this one. It's just awesome.
When I arrived here, there were very few Cape Verdean guides. You could count on one hand. It should be Cape Verdean guides working here in their own country. The Cape Verdeans are very attached to their country. They want to stay here, and if there's a way to do that, then they'll seize that opportunity. What's quite gratifying is that the profession of guide is new here, and it's great to take young people who don't know anything at all about it and to get them started in the right direction. But we can't teach them everything because we don't know it all ourselves.
When I see a sunset like that, I want to paint it. It's so beautiful. It really moves me. It's stunning. I want to capture it forever on canvas.
Theo, Thelma, and Marlin are coming up to the Tarrafal Valley. Not too long ago, this corner of the island was completely isolated, forgotten, more easily accessible by the sea than by land. Tarrafal is a testimony to the hardships of life here in Cape Verde. All through the islands, there's an ongoing struggle for water. Centuries ago, the farmers channeled the mountain springs to their terraced plots. And thanks to this traditional irrigation system, they can still grow fruit and vegetables today.
There's not much land, but we do have water. There are the mountain springs, so they've just built this to grow yams. This is how they irrigate, and it works just fine. This is a mountainous island. The clouds get caught, it rains in the mountains, then the pipes bring the water down to irrigate the valleys below. That's why the valleys are so green. It's striking to see how arid the plateaus are, a real desert. And when you arrive here and you see the deep greens, it's just so pretty in the sunlight, so wonderful. There's no cell phone coverage here. You're isolated, on your own. And if you come here after a hard week's work, it's simply magic.
Tarrafal is really at the end of the earth. This is Theo's favorite spot. He's even planning to get himself a little fisherman's cabin here.
I think that the special thing about Cape Verde, aside from the landscapes, the beauty of the country itself, so full of contrasts, where nature is still so unspoiled, the special thing of Cape Verde is its people, full of enthusiasm, full of the joy of living, and with a deep sense of hospitality and generosity that you hardly find in other countries. Or in any case, not the way you find it here. Because these are very often simple folks, but they're willing to share everything they have, even if it's very little. 2 bananas or a piece of goat's cheese.
The thing about kite surfing is that you're in direct contact with nature. When you put your hand in the water, you touch the water, you feel the wind blowing. And then when you jump, you're suspended in the air. You listen to the wind and the breaking waves. And that is such a thrill. It's my drug. Then after, in the evening, you're so tired. You sleep like a log, and then you wake up to the waves, the wind, and the kite.
The island of Sal is in the easternmost part of Cape Verde. It gets its name from the abundant salt deposits found here. Nothing grows here on the island. It's dry, flat, barren, desolate. It was the last island settled because man was not welcome here. The trade winds blow here 10 months a year. They stir up the ocean and seem to want to reshape the island to make it even more inhospitable. In the center lies a desert of dust. The constant winds carry sand from the Sahara and deposit it in this stark wasteland. The inhabitants live turned towards the ocean and the waves. This is the favored playground of the young Cape Verdeans. Sal, with 350 days of sun a year, the waves and the trade winds, is known as the Hawaii of the Atlantic.
Well, first off, my name is Oteniel George Montero. That's my real name, but here in Santa Maria, everyone calls me Mitu Montero. I was born in Cape Verde, on the island of Sal, and I grew up here. The sea is my life.
Kitesurfing is Mitu's passion. It's a sport that combines the force of the wind and the power of the waves. Mitu, 28, is two-time world champion, and thanks to that he has traveled the world. At first glance, kitesurfing seems like a simple sport, but it is in fact very subtle, an interplay of kite and slipping along the surface of the ocean.
Wow, the swell's getting bigger. Look at that wave. I was competing abroad. I was in Peru and in Mauritius. Then I spent some time in Italy, but I wanted to get back to my little island and just kind of chill out. Now I want to hit the waves. For the past 4 days, there hasn't been enough wind, so I went surfing and did some fishing, but now I'm itching to get back into the water. My specialty is the waves. I use a surfboard when I'm kite surfing. So I use the wind. It's my motor to get into the wave. Then I stabilize the kite and I start to surf the wave. I'm doing two sports at once, kiting and surfing. For me, kite surfing means freedom. You're out in nature. You're listening to the sounds of the sea, the waves, a fish jumping. There's nothing else like it. It's total freedom. I think this is simply paradise. It's hot, you can get the sun, the water's warm, you have the wind, the waves, all the conditions in the world right here on this little island. I don't have to take a 10-hour flight to get to a spot, fly 2 hours for another spot. Here, within 5 minutes, I have the best conditions in the world. Africa is that way. You hit Senegal first. Europe is that way, and Brazil is over in that direction. There you have it.
Surfing sports, a lifestyle that draws the enthusiasts together, whatever their culture. When Jérôme landed in Salles 20 years ago, he realized right away that this was where he would be able to live out his passion for the sea. Jérôme is now MeToo's surfing partner, and no longer a stranger on these lands swept by the trade winds. He was one of the pioneers of surfing in Cape Verde, and he never left. Like many, he was spellbound by the raw beauty of the islands.
It's really wild. Perfect. You have the sun, the water's beautiful, and even at this time of year, it's still warm. This is going to be just great.
When Jérôme arrived here, he was a windsurf instructor. And he's the one that gave me my first windsurf board. He's a great friend, and we go surfing together. We do all these sports together.
Hitting the water nearly every day is like a daily baptism for me. It's a necessity, a very deep passion. You always have to be ready to fulfill your passion, because if an opportunity presents itself, you have to be there to seize it. It may not be there tomorrow, and we neither, for that matter.
The island of Salles was totally unknown in the 1980s. A few surfing and windsurfing buffs who just happened on this spot found that it had ideal conditions for those water sports: sun, wind, and waves. They were the first to cut the waves in the waters off Cape Verde. Mitu was drawn to the ocean right from his early childhood. When he was 8, he picked up an old abandoned board and set out to challenge the waves. In his hunger for excitement, he went out and learned on his own.
Ouais, là, on n'est pas emmerdé, hein.
Yeah, there's no hassle here, that's for sure. You have the sound of the waves and the wind. That's it. Total freedom. It's too good to be real. It's excellent.
Excellent.
When kite surfing came along, it changed Mitu's life. Thanks to him, his hometown, Santa Maria, has become a must on the circuit for surfing enthusiasts of all kinds. Now he teaches kite surfing to the children of his village. But when learning, he instinctively discovered the basic gestures and moves necessary to master this sport. But without technique or experience, it was sometimes a school of hard knocks.
Once I took the sail kite and went out on the water. I did a few runs back and forth, smooth as silk, and then the sail collapsed into the water, and I had no idea how to get it back up into the air. So I'm heading out to sea, and the lines are getting all tangled up. It took me 2 hours to swim back to shore. And when I got back to the beach, I was dead, and I had this huge tangle of spaghetti. I was trying to untangle it for 3 hours, and I just wanted to take a knife to it. But all that was positive. It gave me experience.
It's this experience that Mitu would like to transmit to these children of his island and even beyond. He feels the need to share this school of life with them. On Sal, there are no rides or merry-go-rounds, so Mitu introduces the kids to his strange kite.
The wind and the waves, that's where I get all my energy. Every time I'm out there kiting or surfing, when I catch a wave, it gives me a charge of energy, and that makes me want to live even more. It's something really good. It's very natural. It's hard to explain. You have to experience it. Sometimes you're in the water and you see this orange sunset, the sun sinking into the water. And sometimes I come here on my own and there's not a single person, no noisy cars, nothing. And I think, this is incredible. This is something money just can't buy. This is natural and it's mine. It's great.
For Mitu, the waves have been his road to freedom. Now he has acquired the wisdom of world travelers, and he knows that his greatest riches are right here, on his island in the middle of the Atlantic. Morocco, This kingdom, forged from Arab, European, and African cultures, offers us the exotic magic of the Orient right next door to Europe. It's hard to resist as the country's enchanting light works its magic on you. And the people we're going to meet are all reflections of that warm glow. Abdullah, who lives in the region of Taliouine, will initiate us into the secrets of saffron. The origins of this age-old spice are still steeped in mystery. It's said to have many virtues, and it's worth its weight in gold, red gold. Julie is a nurse. She lives in a valley of the high Atlas, 5 hours of hard driving from the nearest village. This young French woman grapples with the harsh environment in order to care for the most remote communities. Ali and Lahope, guides in the Sahara, are old hands at crossing the desert. Following the traces of the mythical desert caravans, they are carrying on the tradition of the merchants that once traveled the south of Morocco.
What I like most about the desert are the long crossings. When you walk for weeks on end, you get a feeling of accomplishment at the end, a feeling that you haven't wasted your time.
The rugged range of Jebel Sirwa is a stunning link between the high Atlas and the Sahara, a land where you don't expect to find any trace of life. A voyage that only begins there where the trail ends. Long ago, people settled on these lunar plateaus to protect their goods from the pillaging tribes of the Sahara. Their villages blend in with the ochre landscape, as if they were trying to camouflage themselves, and their soil has become the cradle of a heaven-sent spice. They say that saffron was brought here in the 9th century by a tribe traveling from Arabia to Andalusia. Now, 600 years after being driven out of the Iberian Peninsula, their descendants have settled in this similar landscape.
Our great-grandparents were already growing saffron. It's part of us. We've been growing it for ages. We've all grown up with it. We've always grown it here in Taliouine. In other places, they're just starting to grow it. Saffron is an honored guest in our village here. A guest who arrives only in October.
Life in Tizgi, a village of small growers, follows the rhythm of saffron. For Abdullah and his family, this delicate plant is their whole life. It flowers for only 15 days a year, but from the picking all the way to the selling, it demands painstaking work. Everything about this crop has to be done by hand.
صافي اكسلتي ارسلين في عينك صافي يدك انت دو الخمسة يلا نتظل.
We get up at 5 in the morning.
نفطر 5:15 5:30 سفر نتدو.
We do our prayers.
سفر دقيقة غرس.
Then we have breakfast and we set out around 5:30. We get to our saffron fields at daybreak, and we have to finish our work before the sun is up completely.
It's 400 meters from the village to the plateau where the saffron fields are located. The steep trail often runs right alongside a sheer drop. One has to belong to this land so as not to go astray.
It's a rough road, but people are used to it. They have no choice. The road isn't paved, there are only trails here. It's a 45-minute walk uphill all the way. It's a very narrow trail, a really tough climb. The trail is washed out in spots because of the rain. We repair it every time, but it keeps getting damaged. There's a storm, and that's it. Just this year, we've repaired it 3 times.
Caught by the first rays of the sun as they climb, these intrepid saffron growers run a race against time every day during the harvest.
Even if we have to get up early, it's okay. We're happy because we're eager to see all the saffron that grew during the night. We can't wait to get out and pick our treasure. If our field is flourishing, we're happy. When the flower opens and is exposed to the sun, the filaments scatter and they're lost. Here you see in the morning the flower is closed. And that's why we come so early.
Every morning, the plateau abounds with new flowers that contain the precious strands. An ephemeral miracle, and the villagers are quite grateful for this boon.
This is a very good year, and we hope it'll be just as good for the money. We have rich soil here. Saffron grows well thanks to the cool climate. There's a lot of humidity, and that makes for a very good saffron.
So far from the bustling cities, this is how life goes on for these Berbers, who are perfectly in harmony with the seasons of nature. The harvest follows the rhythm of the sun, and they have to stop picking as soon as the plateau starts to get warm. During the saffron season, every minute of work counts, and the whole family pitches in and helps. Even Saida, Abdullah's daughter, she attends school, but after class, she has to help her parents.
متى يحل وقت مسلسل أجابه أبوه اصبر حتى تنتهي النشرة الأخبار لا تحقق
من الزعفرانين صندوق الزعفرانين اها خدامة هي محمد لينا ايوه انا بحفظ الزعفراني
Saffron is vital to us because it's our only resource. That and a few animals we raise. But saffron is our #1 source of income. It's gold. It's gold, thanks be to God. Even when you get good saffron, the price doesn't amount to much compared to the work we growers put into it. Your eyes get tired, your hands, your legs. When you stay seated like this 4 or 5 hours at a stretch, afterwards you can't walk, you can't move, you can't go out. It's really strenuous. You work night and day during the saffron harvest, right up till the end, and the work has to be done right away. You can't put things off. It has a very short lifespan. If you let it go for 2 days, it's lost. It's just 1 month's work a year, but it's the equivalent of 4.
After a month of intense activity, Abdullah is ready to set out on a long road trip.
Okay, here I go. May God protect us. Pray for me. And Ahmed, what should I bring back for you? Now calm down now. I have to go. And you, Saida, what do you want?
Clothes.
And what else?
Shoes.
Shoes, God willing. I'll bring you back a pair of shoes. Bye now. And Rashida, come kiss my hand. What should I bring back for you?
Bring back clothes for her, too.
Okay, Mama, I'm going. Take care of the children. I won't be gone long, God willing.
May God protect you.
This small saffron grower from Tizgi will sell his red gold not just in the local cooperatives and souks. He'll go well beyond the region of Sirwa. From village to village, wherever his encounters may lead him, Abdullah takes us along on the second phase of his work when he is a door-to-door salesman.
You know, it's hard. I have to make these long trips, but I love this life. You're free in this kind of work. You work for yourself, from your own home, and you're not afraid of anyone.
عليكم ثاني وين أقدر يلا
How long will you be gone this time?
Oh, I'll be away a month, month and a half. It depends. I'm going to Ouarzazate, Rala, Rashidia, Gulmin, Tinuir, Tinjded. I'll sell my saffron in all those towns. People buy my saffron mainly in August, when you have all the weddings and celebrations. You know, we already knew that saffron has certain powers, and now it's been proven. So people are using it more and more. Now we know that it's really good for you.
The saffron harvested in the autumn is sold at different times throughout the year. It keeps for a long time and even improves with age. So when Abdullah needs money, he simply takes to the road.
السلام عليكم.
السلام ورحمة الله.
بخير.
ماني
لاباس؟
بخير تهنا.
لا.
لاباس كله.
ما تزنزات.
زعفران الحر.
واخا يلا بشكرا.
يلا سيدي بسم الله. يلا.
Here we go.
واخا يلا هيك.
Let's have a look. It's pure saffron?
Of course it is. Top quality. It comes from my village. My saffron comes straight from my fields. I don't buy it in the souk.
Okay, I'll take 5 grams.
Well, look at it. Just take a whiff.
Great.
It's good. Homegrown, good. Even though it's this year's, it's light and dry. Nothing more delicate than the scales.
The scales have to be precise.
Well, you see, they're accurate.
Good.
That'll do it?
Yes, that's perfect. That smells good.
You're right. Plus, it has medicinal properties. It's good for colds and teas. It's good for what ails you.
Yes, it's good for everything.
It's even good for death.
Oh, that I didn't know.
The rising demand for this spice has driven up the prices and at the same time raised Abdullah's hopes of improving his family's standard of living.
By selling my saffron, I can buy clothes for the children, some sugar, tea, and flour. That's how it is with saffron. Saffron is money. Take a look.
It's a beautiful color. How much is it?
€5 a gram.
I'll take 4 grams.
I used to sell it for €2, €3, €4 a gram, but the price has gone way up.
That's expensive.
No, it's not expensive. If you know what goes into it, it's not a lot.
This is good saffron. I use it a lot. I put it in my tea to give it an aroma, in the tajin, the couscous. I use it for my children. I make an herbal tea with it when they're sick.
Live in a city? It's never even crossed my mind. This is where my children are growing up. This is our life. We have to grow saffron and apples. That's how it is. It's the earth that feeds us.
At the end of this voyage, the simple freedom of these men of the earth is a natural gift that feeds its own dreams in the silence and immensity of the high plateaus of Sirwa. The Tessaout, this valley in the high Atlas Mountains, was for a long time unexplored. Even at the beginning of the 20th century, it was not known that this remote valley was inhabited. It seems as if the modern world had stopped on the threshold of these deep gorges. Julie, 24, is a nurse. She left her life in the city of Lyon in France to spend a year in Morocco. Along with Khadija, her interpreter, she takes care of the people of the region. A minibus has set out during the night on the valley's single track to come get the two women and take them to the site of their next consultation.
We work together. She teaches me about everyday life here. This headscarf is part of that. So she's my guide. She's my interpreter and my guide.
They cover a vast area. Julie and Khadija work in 14 villages deep within the valley. Getting there is already an adventure in itself.
This track is very long. It stops in Magdaz. From there on, there's no more road. So we feel like we're in a completely isolated corner of the planet. It seems really far away from everything. And then we wonder, how's it possible that there are people actually living way out here? We think, my God, it's almost unnatural.
Mohammed has also come a long way to be taken care of. He's a farmer and lives in Ishbaken, about 20 kilometers away. It's a difficult trip, so he put it off as long as he possibly could. Now he has to do it.
It took him 4 hours on muleback to get here.
How long has he had these stomach pains?
It's been a month now.
Here you have the everyday gestures that would take 5 minutes in France, but here they take a lot longer because there are the constraints. We don't have all the equipment, there's no electricity. No doubt about it, it's a different way of life, a different rhythm.
Not much comes into this valley. Only a few of the local drivers are willing to tackle these rough roads. They are the only link between the first town and the inhabitants of the Tessaout Valley. This dispensary was opened in 2002 by a French association, Tassadour. Nurses come here to work for a year. They provide basic medical care and take part in public health programs.
We take care of the children, all the vaccinations, and the pediatric problems that might come up. Digestive infections, ear, nose, and throat, general medicine. And there's the family planning programs and a lot of pregnancy care and emergency care. That happens a lot. And we're also a presence for them. We've realized that the commitment and values are much more important here than the acts themselves. So just being here with them reassures them. It means a lot to them. Time is quite elastic here, so you let yourself go with it because you don't have a choice. It's the rhythm here, and you learn to live with it. There's no way to be stressed because that's just how it is. You learn to make do with what you have.
The most important thing in Tessaout is the Wadi, this stream of the same name. It not only irrigates the crops, but it also serves as a means of transportation.
It's a beautiful valley, but it's hard living here in the winter, especially when it snows. But in the spring, the water from the melting snow is very useful. Sometimes the river overflows, and that damages the crops. But we accept that because here, like everywhere else in the world, water is essential, and we respect water and all living things. The Tissaout is a magnificent region. It has a lot of water. We lead very simple lives, but the people here are happy. I don't like towns too much. Too much noise, hustle and bustle, cars everywhere. It's not for me. If they would improve the roads here, that would really make our lives better.
We go along with Julie and Khadija on the path to Taslint, 10 kilometers down from the dispensary, where they have to do some vaccinations. Most of the time, the two women make the trip on foot, conditions permitting.
We can't really make long-term projects because we never know what's going to happen. If we'll be able to make it back, if the road will be blocked, if it's going to rain, if the river's going to flood. So we have to live in the present moment, and that gives you a serenity. Their culture is very strong. Their family ties as well. The family is very important. They like living here. They don't want to leave. And from my experience, I can say, yes, these people like it here in their valley, and they want to stay. Life is hard here. The people, the women have to work in the fields. It's hard. And yet, there's a certain aura about them, and they're always ready to laugh. You want to feel sorry for them because we couldn't imagine living our whole life here. But in fact, the people are very happy here. I adapted to life here pretty quickly. I think that later, when I go back, it will be difficult to adjust. And yet I know full well that I'm a foreigner here, that I'm just here for a certain time to give what I can, live as fully as I can here, but that this is not my home. So it's good that it all has a beginning and an end.
Julie has surely found here the essence of what drew her to this profession. An authentic bond with these men and women whose everyday life is so different from ours. Now we head south towards even wider horizons. Towards a land where the voyager loses himself in both space and time. A harsh land where the buffeting winds sculpt the landscape, and the pitiless sun beats down on man and beasts. Here we're on the outskirts of the Sahara, halfway between the plains of Tafilalet and the Dra Valley. This region is the home of a myth, the myth of the great caravans. Laden with gold, salt, and other riches, they would ply the routes between Morocco, Niger, Sudan, and Mauritania. The caravans made the fortunes of men and cities, and thus created vital links between these countries. And now, what remains of them is a romantic image that lingers in our memories, and that of these two sons of the desert. Ali and Leho are guides in the Sahara. They are old hands at long crossings with their camels. 1.5 months, sometimes 2, completely on their own, cut off from the outside world. The two men have been traveling for several days now. They're taking their caravan over an old trail that leads to Timbuktu.
We're going to explore a trail that we've never taken before with the help of God. Le'o and I have been desert guides for about 20 years. We have experience and we set out looking for new routes. We're trying to find wells. If we can find water, we'll be able to open this new route to tourists.
The caravans used to transport dates, barley. There were no cars. It was done by camel. In the old days, they would carry a little gold and money that they would hide. It was all carried by caravan.
They also carried salt.
Right, and salt too. They'd carried henna. They used to carry a lot of henna. Now, there are no more caravans. That's all finished.
No compass, no GPS. They make their way to the Dra Valley by reading the signs of the earth. For several centuries, the columns of camels furrowed these fields of stone, but the traces of their passage are beginning to fade.
هات بعدها وريد داد الكوبري الله اعلم خصمك اياها
لا ورني
ورتسين ها
ورنشكي هورني مرين يعني غا
We'll be right back. We're going to try to find the trail. Keep an eye on the camels.
They made this pile of stones back in the old days. They're all over the Nida region, all the way to Sakia La Hamra, and even down to the south of Morocco. We're on the right track. It's the trail that leads to the Dra Valley. This is a very old trail. These piles of stones, these cairns, are about 2,000 years old. They mark the trail to Tantan, Saka, La Hamra, and even into Mauritania.
الحمد لله ربي يلا ربي ويا العفون سنيديرا يا ماضري وناول يا معذور الله ربي الله ربي يلا ربي ويا العفون سنيديرا
غربي
دينا
نفصل نيشان مني داس نيشان
ما برين سياسة يمكننا
فرد دياس وتاي اي خلاد وتاي فرد ومان هو يزدي زند الجوات خرطني تتف زند الجو تقريبا كتم دين ما يمكنش مرات حلا ولكن بزاف الصحراء
I like the city from time to time. But it's in the desert where I really feel alive. I feel part of a whole. I really feel my soul. I'm at one with nature, and I feel close to God. I feel a presence in this vast wilderness, in the starry sky, the moon. Out here, my thoughts become focused on life's essentials, the family, and especially my children. I feel at peace. The desert, it calms the soul and the mind.
After more than 10 days of traveling, our supply of water is almost finished. It's vital for both the men and the animals to find a well. Wells used to dot the length of the caravan route every 20 to 30 kilometers, but some have dried up and others have been forgotten.
They can go 15 days without water, and now it's only been a week. When water is available and they drink as much as they want, they can hold out for 15 days. And they'll drink about 40 liters of water now.
What I like most about the desert are the long crossings. When you walk for weeks on end, you get a feeling of accomplishment at the end, a feeling that you haven't wasted your time.
These important commercial routes once gave rise to flourishing cities in the middle of the desert. That golden age is now past, but some cities like Tamgroot are still a stopover for these modern-day caravans. Ali and Laho take us to a traditional caravanserai to meet Baba Raglil, guardian of the past.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم
ضيف
السلام
الله.
ورحمة الله.
السلام عليكم.
على سلامتكم. على سلامتكم. أنتم بخير. الحمد لله على سلامتكم.
كثير بخير.
على سلامتكم. مرحبا بكل فرح.
جينا بواحد حنايا جينا بواحد.
We've come a long way with our caravan from Umjran, and we'd like to spend the night here in Tamgroot.
مرحبا بكم بكل فرح.
May come in. Come in. Welcome.
مرحبا بكم.
بارك الله فيك. تفضل معنا سيدي.
He is a descendant of a caravaneer. He's also the living memory of this city. Tamgroot is home to a treasure, a library of thousands of books collected thanks to one man, a theologian named Mohammed ben Nasser. He used the caravans to import a store of knowledge here and make this city a center of learning for scholars of the time.
It was around 1000-something Vijira, that is, the 17th century for Europe. Mohammed bin Nasser taught theology, the Quran, and the sciences in Tamgroot to more than 1,400 students. He brought books on philosophy, grammar, medicine, astrology, Berber, Turkish, and Arabic. Our library's oldest book dates back to the year 483 of the Hijra, 1063 of your calendar. It comes from Cordoba and Andalusia. These works were written by scholars from all different countries. And Sidi Mohammed bin Nasser wanted all these books to be available to everyone, not only the elite. They used to say, may God make our country a land of religion, of culture, and a haven of peace for the poor and for the needy.
Ali and Laho know that to open the trail once they get past Tamgroot, the caravan is going to have to face a formidable obstacle: these high cliffs. The trail exists. Animals used to take it frequently, but Ali and Laho don't know exactly where it is.
بريد ده سميتو ها لا تبخش الا لا ضر غنكرا الحديد حص السلام عليكم.
Hi there. Are you from around here?
Yes, I am.
انت من هنايا.
Do you know the trails around here?
Yes.
بخير الحمد لله. يا ربي هات النيران دوس.
We'd like to go to Tizi and Toflet. I think that we're on the right path, but we're not sure. Maybe you could show us which way it is, please?
Sure, I can help you out.
Muadi, the nomad, agrees to join the expedition. He goes off to leave his motorcycle at his encampment and will hook up with the caravan a bit further along the way.
الله يرحم والدي. يلا. هالكل نزور.
When you set out, your goal is to arrive at your destination, whatever the cost. It gets pretty tricky sometimes, but we've decided to revive the trails of our ancestors. In spite of the heat and the difficulties, I won't give up. Otherwise, that would be the end of everything. A whole world would disappear. We have to resist in order to preserve our heritage. This is our history, and we have to keep it alive for our children and future generations, God willing.
يا سوف نضال بربي يا دكيك سا يا سوف نطال بربي يا دكيك يا دكيك سا يا سوف نطال بربي يا دكيك سا يا سوف
Muadi.
Muadi, did you know the people that used to live here?
Yes. It was the Balu family that used to live here. They didn't have any blankets. They'd just cover up with a bit of ragged cloth and they'd eat a bit of bran bread. And Malu, she'd take shelter up there. That's where they'd keep the dromedaries. And a little further up is where he would stay, off by himself, and eat on his own.
غير زعما تيسيروا صعبة.
مرة والحو. غير خطر.
أشكوت.
Look, a jackal did this.
وشنا.
Did you see?
أمرت لي تناضغيت.
نظرنا شنين.
وشنا. تني. أمرت لي تزقوا يد سمنة ستين.
To catch the jackal, they bury a trap here. And then, when the jackal digs it, he gets caught.
Hey, Muadi, which trail do we take?
The one on the right. Ali, please go check with him. I'm telling you, it's okay. No, Ali's going to check it out with you.
We're not going any further until we see what the trail looks like.
Go all the way to the end to check. You can make it through. Other caravans have come through before us with their donkeys and dromedaries.
Here, we're coming into a really tricky passage. Muadi knows the trail well. He says if we don't take it, we'll have to make a long detour all the way around. We'll have to tighten up the loads. Each one leads his dromedary, and we'll trust in God. But still, it's extremely rocky.
إن شاء الله. أنا وأنا إن شاء الله.
The hard thing in the desert is having the responsibility of the caravan when you're reopening a poorly marked trail. When there's a storm, bad weather, sandstorms, and when you're at the head of the caravan leading people and animals, it's not easy. You really have to back each other up in all situations. We may know the region very well, but even so, we always have to be very alert. Sometimes it's hard, but I wouldn't change my life for anything in the world.
مودي والمهم كعون ربي مودي
سماع الحب
ان
شاء الله يا رب ان شاء الله ان شاء الله
ارض ورياض ان شاء الله
ان شاء الله استمر ان شاء الله عليك ان شاء الله مع السلامه
فضلنا كان اللي نزيتي زينا مع تفلت كينا تولي زي الله يرحم والديك
شو انت نطرتيني
ان
شاء الله ودي
بارك الله فيك
الله يرحم والدين الله يعاون
عبد السلام الله يعاون
الله يعاون ان شاء الله
طريق السلام طريق السلامه الله يعاون
وبالسلامه
Take to the road, make the journey, strike out to discover new lands, new hopes, and everything else will be granted to you. The long story of the caravans continues in this boundless landscape, heading towards new horizons. Today, a look towards the infinite, off the beaten track in Egypt. Most of this country is a desert with many different facets. The people we'll be meeting have chosen to make their lives here in these vast spaces. Mansour is a child of the oasis. At Bahariya, this young veterinarian cares for all the animals of the small farmers. He has become an important personality in the local community. Yuil was a civil engineer. He left his job as an architect to become a monk and joined one of the monasteries in the Wadi Natrun Valley that for 16 centuries now have been maintaining the traditions of Christianity and desert monks. Fenouille is a navigator of the sands. For more than 30 years, this Frenchman has been exploring these vast spaces. Traveling the desert with him means setting out to discover magnificent sights.
I never get tired of these landscapes. It's a strange feeling, like going back to the beginning of the world, like you're starting over. I've never met anyone who wasn't moved by the sight of these shifting dunes.
Sahara. In the Arabic language, this word does not mean a region or a territory. It simply means desert. Just as the word ocean doesn't designate a specific body of water. From the banks of the Nile to the shores of the Atlantic, this one desert, under different names, stretches over a large part of northern Africa. It covers 2/3 of Egypt up to the Libyan border. Here it's called the Western Desert, formerly the Libyan Desert, and it's one of the driest deserts in the world. The ancient Egyptians considered this desert an evil kingdom. Yet in the middle of this mineral ocean, a verdant archipelago resists the onslaught of the waves of sand. The 5 oases of the Western Desert are sheltered islands where the miracle of life has triumphed over the hostile climate. Living in an oasis means working the land. Here, farming, trade, and prayer set the rhythm of life. People leave for the fields every morning at the same time. They cultivate the land the same way their ancestors did. The path of life has already been traced for these men and women, and they follow it not out of resignation, but out of respect for tradition.
Is she eating well?
Yes.
Is she eating normally?
Yes.
Is she pregnant?
Yes. 3 months.
At Bawiti in the Bahariya oasis, everyone knows Dr. Mansour. He's from Bahariya himself, and he's the only vet in town. For the farmers raising a few animals here, Mansour is a godsend.
Everybody likes the vet here because they know I'm always ready to help them and their animals. Animals are their livelihood, and people worry as much about the health of their livestock as that of their children. After I finished my studies in Cairo, I tried to work there, but all I got were offers in pharmaceutical companies, and that didn't interest me. In the oasis, everybody has livestock, so there's much more work here. Oddly enough, there are a lot more vets in the suburbs of Cairo than in the oasis. But there's a real human dimension here, and it's not too crowded. I'm the second vet who comes from the oasis. I'm a child of the oasis.
Herodotus called them islands of the blessed. For more than 8,000 years, these oases have been inhabited, cultivated, preserved. Long isolated, the people of Siwa used to live in a town constructed of mud brick, nicknamed the City of Mud. A series of torrential rainstorms in the heart of the desert brutally transformed the past into a heap of ruins. In the space of 4 years, from 1926 to 1930, the city of Shali was totally devastated. As they had no other place to go, the people of the oasis built another city right next to it. And life goes on, more or less as always.
الو والله المشكله في يعني نبدا بكره يا يوم السبت معلش
هاي تعال بص يا دكتور بص الحاله مدي قد ايه
كل 20 يوم
You need to give him a series of injections. That's the best way to treat him. You need to give him 3 doses spread out over several days. I'll come back as soon as I can to examine them all, like I did for Sammy's camels. You really have to treat your sick animals every day for a month. Then you won't have to worry anymore. Hello, how are you?
Fine.
This is Syed Sanusi. He's an agronomic engineer, and he's the best date palm specialist in the entire oasis. Okay, good luck.
Maybe God created the desert so that man could appreciate the date trees, mused the author Paulo Coelho. There are 1,500,000 date palms in Bahariya. Dates are the leading product of the oasis. Here, everyone believes that the date palm benefits from special divine grace, and they all take very good care of this legendary tree.
The date palm is like a human being. It's like a woman. Up until the age of about 45, she's fertile. Well, it's the same with the date palm. After 45, the female date palm no longer produces. And even if there is fertilization, the tree won't yield any fruit.
All the oases in the western desert are situated in low basins of limestone plateaus, between 100 and 130 meters below sea level. And in this geological configuration, the groundwater just gushes up. At first, this hot water that comes from deep within the earth flowed naturally. And then, as needs grew, other methods were needed to ensure the supply of water. An oasis is a natural environment structured by man, with a whole system of technical and social management of the resources.
In the Bahariya oasis, there are 86 machine-dug wells and 243 natural wells. Until 1976, all the oasis had only natural wells, but constant pumping caused water levels to drop, and from that time on, they started using machines to drill wells.
It's not your garden variety dandelion that can go out and live in the Sahara, said Theodore Monod, a great connoisseur of the desert. And yet, in the oasis, the work of man has made some inroads into the desert. On the other hand, they've had to dig deeper and deeper to reach new water levels. Some investors are even trying to drill 1,200 meters into the subsoil. They dream of transforming these vast arid zones into fertile land, dreams that often last only a few seasons. The desert ground retains nothing. It has no memory, whereas for millennia, the land has been intensively worked in the same way. In all the North African oases, the fields are divided up in the same way. From small plots to fruit and palm tree plantations, everything is organized around the irrigation. And the organization of the water sharing remains an intangible rule of life. Tafoya has to irrigate regularly, twice a week in winter and every day in the heart of summer. It's painstaking work that no machine can do, and the tools they use haven't changed for centuries.
Every plot of land is about 3 by 3 meters, and I have quite a few plots. I have about 100 to irrigate on this side and about the same number on the other side of the road. Farming is a difficult job, but it's our profession, and it's been our family's profession for centuries. We never stop working, every day. But every job has its drawbacks. I'm used to it. I've always done it. And when you do your job well, you can hope for good results. As the proverb goes, every effort has its reward.
Meanwhile, Dr. Mansour continues working on the farms. Be it for treatment or artificial insemination, he is always on call. There is, however, one domestic animal that he treats less and less, the donkey. For thousands of years, the donkey was the main means of transportation for man and goods in the oasis. But today, due to globalization, Chinese motorbikes have become serious competitors. Even in the heart of the desert, life is changing. In fits and starts, progress is coming to the oasis. But in these islands of the blessed, there is still a pleasant tranquility. For the people of the sand, working the earth is still the basis of their lives. They are strongly attached to the rhythm of work imposed by the sun, to the earth that must be watered, to life that must be protected.
The desert surrounding us is vast and it protects us a little. There have been changes, but there are still a lot of people who preserve their customs and traditions. One day my father left for Cairo, and he couldn't stand the hustle and bustle. When he came back, he said something I liked a lot. He told me, if there's paradise on earth, it's the oasis. I couldn't live anywhere but in the oasis. And here, as the saying goes, I'm like a fish in water. And it's true. I couldn't live anywhere else.
In the land of the muezzin, the peal of church bells sets a different tone. At 4 in the morning, the monks assemble for prayers. 2 hours of psalms, chants, and litanies. The history of Christianity is closely linked to the history of Egypt. According to the Bible, the Holy Family took refuge here after the birth of Christ. So the Son of God spent the first years of his life on Egyptian soil. A few centuries later, the early Coptic Christians cite the Holy Family's flight into Egypt as proof that Christianity was born here. The fine points of doctrine aside, one thing is certain. Over time, thousands and thousands of monks have taken the vow to live here and consecrate their lives to meditation and prayer. Today, monastic life is attracting more and more candidates. And in light of their former lives, these men do not make the decision to enter the monastery lightly. Father Yuil is one of the abbey's 120 monks. He's been here for 13 years, after leading a rather interesting secular life before.
I was born in Mansoura. I grew up there and I studied there, in a school of civil engineering. And after I got my engineering diploma, I worked for a few years in Hurghada and then El Guana. I worked for several different architectural firms. And then I decided to become a monk because I wanted to spend the rest of my life in God's presence. I wanted to live in a place like this. Here I'm completely happy. And I think it's the best decision I ever made in my life.
One doesn't go to the desert to escape, even if the spirit can find refuge here. The Christians of the Orient settled here in order to pray in total peace. Islam didn't exist yet, and monks were already retiring from the world in search of an ascetic life. Over more than 16 centuries, their roots have taken hold here in the Sete Desert. At first, they were hermits, and then they formed communities. Now there are still 4 active Coptic monasteries in the valley of Wadi Natrun. For these desert monks, the isolation and living in caves like the early hermits belong to the distant past. Now they live in communities. Their cells are much more comfortable, but no outsider is allowed to enter them. They follow the rules of monastic life to the letter.
Monastic life follows 3 rules: poverty, obedience, and chastity. Poverty allows detachment from everything. Chastity fosters purity of body and spirit. Obedience has to be followed all through life. You have to leave all your decisions in the hands of the abbot. Obedience is without question the most difficult of the rules.
The daily life of the monks takes place behind these imposing walls. Walls meant to help in their spiritual quest, but also to protect them from the outside world. And yet their existence is not solely contemplative. Monasticism is based on 2 basic principles: prayer and work. Life in these monasteries is organized so as to be self-sufficient. Before becoming a monk, candidates have to prove themselves over several years. Novices wear a blue or brown robe for the first 2 years, and then a white one for a year or 2. It's a very strict hierarchy, and it's only after they have taken their final vows that they let their hair and beard grow. There are 120 monks in the convent of St. Pichoy, but there are at least 400 lay workers there as well. Some of them live here all year long, others for a few months at a time.
We give him the work because if he gets the work here, he gets money for his family, to feed his family. And he spends good time in desert, in monastic life, because we let them pray, we let them confess, we let them share our life.
Fields of cereal, olive groves, fruit trees, beans, the monks and their employees have managed to raise crops on the threshold of the desert. Self-sufficiency on a grand scale. A monastery operates like a business with a variety of activities. It's more than a community. It's a world in itself with its own codes and organization. There are no taxes, but there's no individual gain either. Everything is for the collective good. They've been in this spot for more than 16 centuries. Yet these monks have come a long way since the year 390 AD. They're not afraid of progress, and their skills acquired before they enter the monastery are put to good use on new development projects. The combination of techniques and ancestral skills has allowed them to earn a certain reputation. The influence of the Christians of Egypt means an economic influence too. And on this point, the monks are actively involved.
Obviously, we make use of technology, cell phones and computers. A lot of monks use the internet. Almost all the monks have had higher education. Today we can master technology and not let it master us, and it's essential to understand the difference.
Even if Coptic monks have not lived like hermits for a long time now, the desert still figures strongly in their religious vocation. They make regular retreats here alone for a few days or weeks to meditate and carry on this tradition.
In the desert, the monk isolates himself and detaches himself from daily life. He lives only for God. Our spiritual fathers taught us that contemplation in the desert frees us from all material attachment so that we can deepen our spiritual relationship with God. Obviously, a person who can't adapt to the desert won't be able to bear this isolation. But on the whole, the desert encourages personal growth. Here, we are in peace.
The Wadi Natrun monks are a real success. When the monastery opens its doors to the public, it attracts an impressive crowd of faithful. The monks are seen as the cement of this religious community. Their continuous presence down through the centuries and their resistance to persecution are seen as a symbol of immortality. It's difficult to estimate the number of Copts. 7 million according to the Egyptian government, but religious authorities put the figure at 12 million. The figures are often a subject of controversy. But Egyptian Christians are attached to their particularities, and for them, coming to these monasteries is like making a pilgrimage. Undoubtedly, these Christian chants bring on a sort of Oriental blues, but the monks don't wring their hands in prayer, and they seem consistently cheerful.
A monk's life is not one of competition, but of encouragement. There is no competition between us. There is a collective spirit where everyone can develop his own spiritual life. Our community is part of this world, a part protected by the angels. Angelic life has no definition. It is a life where you feel at one with yourself, quite simply.
Even though it's arid and desolate, the desert has many faces. Sometimes man is tolerated here on the condition that he's willing to show humility before the harsh elements. An unavoidable expanse on the caravan route, this western desert is a hostile place, and yet it exerts an attraction, a sort of magnetism. It is a refuge for mystics and the contemplative in search of the pure. This landscape is also the ideal setting for adventurers in quest of boundless horizons. Nobody knows this man's name, but his nickname is well known. Fenuya is a desert lover with a particular fondness for the western desert. For more than 30 years, he has been crisscrossing the desert in a variety of ways. At first, he organized and ran rallies. Then his competitive spirit waned, but he still has a real fascination for these landscapes.
For the ancient Egyptians, the Great Sea of Sand began immediately after the last oasis. This marked the end of the kingdom of the living and the beginning of the kingdom of the dead. And between them, there was a dangerous no man's land called chaos, where you could find yourself trapped. And they were right to be wary, because in certain directions, it was uncrossable. The desert is both life and death. It reminds us of the fragility and the beauty of our humanity.
Heading out into the desert is always an adventure. You can't forget anything: gas, water, food, tools. But above all, you mustn't set out in just one vehicle. A breakdown in the middle of the desert can quickly turn into a serious problem.
This is a well-known Saharan ritual that gives the tire the same consistency as a camel's hoof. We deflate the tire. It gets wider, and there's more surface in contact with the ground. We deflate it to 800 grams of pressure.
The desert is a sort of solid ocean, and there are many similarities between the sea and the desert. The chain of dunes is like a series of rollers on the sea, and rather than driving, you feel more like you are navigating as you set a course to make your way across this sea of sand.
You have to consider the dune as something fluid, something that shifts, that moves, and that's why they give you a feeling of eternity. You see a frozen storm. Here we're on Gourd Abu Muharrak, the father of impassable dunes. Abu means father, but I prefer to say mother. It's prettier. It represents the mother, maternity, and Mother Ocean because it's vast like an ocean. So I'm bending the rules, but why not? It stretches over 550 kilometers, so it's the longest chain of dunes in Egypt, in the Sahara, and probably in the world. I never get tired of it. I like discovering it on foot, by camel, motorcycle, or car. Different pleasures, but equally profound. Being in the desert means choosing your route, studying the difficulties, and trying to evaluate them correctly.
Hundreds of kilometers to the south, a passage leads you through the waves of dunes to an amazing sight. When you cross the western desert with Fenouil, you discover areas that are as grandiose as they are mysterious. And we come upon a phenomenon that no one could have imagined finding here.
Here, we're in the only limestone cave in the Sahara. You can see enormous stalactites. The corresponding stalagmites have been buried under the sand for thousands of years, and this proves that the Sahara was once green. This cave was a mandatory stopover for caravans for two reasons. There was water in it, that was important, and because it's situated 15 kilometers from a passage where the camels can get through the dunes. A German explorer rediscovered it in 1873, but it didn't interest him. He didn't note its geographical location. Much later, in 1991, another German rediscovered the cave. But now, the water's gone.
Traveling the desert means confronting the unknown, looking for landmarks in the middle of emptiness, and knowing that the slightest undulation in the sand could turn out to be a trap. It calls for a great deal of knowledge to be able to negotiate the desert safely. One miscalculation, and the car stops short. In the second vehicle, Karim, the second driver, Rushdie, the mechanic, and Saeed, the cook, are bogged down. 3 times, 5 times a day, they have to help each other out of these sand traps.
Karim, tell us when you're okay. Okay, let's go. Karim studies sand. He's a great guy. He's always cool. Okay, enough compliments. When you're in the sand and the dunes, you need 2 vehicles because anyone can get into trouble. You can fool around when you're done, but not before. You never know what might happen.
Fenouil was certainly not predestined to become a desert specialist. He had a degree in philosophy and became a journalist. While working on a story in Algeria, he discovered the elegance and freedom of the shifting dunes. That was almost 40 years ago, and from that moment on, his love for the desert grew stronger and stronger.
Here you feel like you're at the beginning of the world. There's something magical about these rocks and the soft sand. If there wasn't any sand, we'd be driving over the rocks, but here you glide on the sand between the rocks that are getting closer and closer. and forcing us a little off course. But they're so beautiful, you can't blame them. When it hits the rocks, the wind moves the dune in a different way. It digs into it. Like when you're at sea, you have to be careful near the reefs because of the whirlpools. Here, too, you can find dune whirlpools, and sometimes you find hollows that can be a little dangerous. When I discovered this place, it sounds a little pretentious to say discovered. It's simply that there was no logical reason for the nomads to pass this way. And when you see a place with no cairn, no stone markers, that means no one's come through. I came this way for the fun of it, and when I found this place, I called it the Halong Bay of the desert. All these rocks change the way the wind blows on the dunes. The dunes separate and keep drifting, showing how sand is fluid. It passes between the islets, like currents running between the rocks in Halong Bay. The sand continues on its course. This landscape is unique.
As soon as night falls, so does the temperature, and it's brutal. You have to set up camp well before sunset, make a fire, and let Saeed get to work with the gas burner.
Between friends, we talk about why we come here. We say that we must be a little crazy. In the old days, someone could love the desert, but it was also their livelihood. I'm talking about the caravans that crossed it. But if you want to abandon civilization and comfort in search of danger and thrills, as well as the love of nature, there's nothing rational about it. It's a passion, like for the ocean and the mountains. You accept the hardships, because it doesn't matter how you travel. Sooner or later, the vast desert is always going to give you problems. The Western Desert, it's my favorite, because it's the wildest. It's the largest expanse of sand. There are legends about it, but also stories of adventurers and explorers. It's also the most diverse desert that I know. The landscape often changes in Egypt's Western Desert.
Sometimes the wind and the sand give birth to strangely formed knolls, to dunes with perfect curves, or to beds of rocks sculpted like blades. You need a vast amount of knowledge of the desert, a dose of recklessness, and that famous touch of madness to brave such wild terrain. Even though there's no proper marker, this is the only way through. This gully has a drop of more than 120 meters.
Karim, I think you can shift down to third gear, and then to second at the bottom. Here you have a typical trap. When you see a dune with a very steep slope, you have to watch out not to crash into the rocks. We've all made stupid mistakes in the desert. I'm the first to admit it. I came here without a clue. I survived learning little by little. But when you cross the dunes, you always have to be humble. You have to understand, think things out, evaluate.
Burning hot when the sun is at its zenith, freezing cold in the middle of the night, the desert is a land of extremes. What artist could have conjured up such incredible settings where the light completely changes the perspective, where pretentious little outcrops break the dune's flowing curve? In the desert, you're sure to find landscapes that are impressive, moving, or depressing, depending on the traveler's mood.
A lot of beautiful things have been written about the desert because it's so inspiring. But the story I like the most is by Honoré de Balzac, about an old soldier under Napoleon, telling the story of his Egyptian campaign to his grandchildren, who keep interrupting him, asking, "What was the desert like?" He looks for the right words and finally comes up with, "The desert is God before man." And you don't have to be a believer to have a feeling for transcendence. When you see the desert, you see a virgin land before man's done anything, either good or bad.
After 5 days of pure desert, this sign of life looms up like a mirage. This remote, forgotten citadel is the vestige of a time when life really existed in this place that's so lifeless today. What happened? Why did men construct this fortress, and why here, in the middle of nowhere?
This is the biggest fortress built during the Roman colonization around 2,000 years ago. The Romans occupied Egypt for 400 years, and this fortress was used to protect the caravans. There were major Roman garrisons here. The place was called Ain Dabadib, the Well of the Scorpion. It was abandoned 500 years ago because the wells dried up. But then water reappeared in Karga, which is now the largest oasis in Egypt. And this place stayed abandoned. It might have been the last place where Cambyses' army passed through. I say might, but scientists seem to agree. The last traces of the army were found here.
In 525 BC, Cambyses, the powerful king of Persia, after conquering most of Egypt, sent his army to the oasis of Siwa to subjugate the oracle of Amun. But then, a unique occurrence in history. That army of 50,000 men vanished.
For a long time, people thought it was a legend. But now, historians know that Cambyses' army was composed of 50,000 men, the largest army in the world at that time. Herodotus wrote that the army was buried in a terrible sandstorm. The idea is interesting for a movie. It was used in The English Patient. The more probable explanation is that the army made a navigational error and got lost, that they died of thirst because they never came back and they never arrived at Siwa. And as no trace of them was found, they must be buried under one of the enormous cathedral dunes in the Great Sea of Sand.
For more than a century, historians have been looking for traces of that army. And in November 2009, Italian archaeologists discovered vestiges of what might be part of Cambyses' famous army. 2,500 years later, the enigma of that disappearance might be solved. People have become interested in the desert fairly recently. As long as only caravans crossed it, nobody, or almost nobody, ventured off the camel routes. It was not until the beginning of the 20th century that the first explorers began to venture in, thanks to the automobile. And those scientific expeditions were hunting for the lost oasis, called Zerzura. That paradise on Earth contained a city sheltered in the heart of steep cliffs. And the myth of the lost oasis still preserves all its mystery.
We're on one of history's first roads for cars, built between 1925 and 1930 by the English and their Hindu workers, because the Egyptians didn't want to go out into the desert to break rocks. It was quickly abandoned because it was covered by sand. With a new road circling the oasis, this one's been forgotten. When it was reopened in 1986, no one had been on it for more than 30 years, and you felt like you were traveling towards a magical land, a lost oasis, where there were traces of civilization, cairns, but no cars. Everything had been erased by the wind. This is a beautiful barcan. This dune has 3 characteristics. It's the fastest moving dune in the world, it has a crescent shape, and its 2 tips advance. On the average, a barcan can move 5 to 12 meters a year. That's 75 meters a century. What's more, it can give birth. At the tip, a little pile of sand appears that then becomes another crescent that grows.
This apparently hostile land seems to breathe, as if the Sahara were a place that gives life to the mineral world. After days of traveling, after making a big loop from east to west in a multiform desert, Fenouil finally arrives at what he considers the most beautiful sight of all, the Great Sea of Sand. All of a sudden, infinity is within reach.
I never get tired of these landscapes. It's a strange feeling, like going back to the beginning of the world, like you're starting over. I've never met anyone who wasn't moved by the sight of these shifting dunes. Everyone is free to look for what he wants in the desert. I don't come looking for solitude. I'm very close to my family and friends. But when I come to the desert, I enjoy this total contrast. When I'm in the civilized world, I get the morning and evening papers and devour all the news. When I go back to the desert, I do without the news for a month. I come back and I ask, which old fools died? But I'm not being heartless. It's just that I get the feeling that the world hasn't changed much. There's always just as much misery, just as much happiness, as much beauty and ugliness, and I took advantage of the beauty and the peace of the desert, which cleansed my soul.
This man has managed to find his way in a place where, in fact, paths do not exist.
The desert makes me think of a mystic Tuareg song that ends with, "He who dies of immense love needs immense forgetfulness." Only passionate love, or the desert, could inspire a phrase like that.